I'm also a very interested person, having been affected by the circumstances giving rise to this application. So I'm not sure exactly what you want us, the three of us you are inviting, to address. But in general terms, I think this is a very interesting development, and we have the MDC, or the Supreme Court judgment in the MDC case, to thank for this situation. I think it's a very interesting development because really, in Zimbabwe, from my experience, for all the years I was active in ZANU-PF, there was no single occasion I felt that the party was a legal or a constitutional entity. I was always very struck by the ignorance of our collective selves, either the ignorance of the Constitution or the contempt of the Constitution. I really honestly don't remember, either as a member of a cell, a branch, a district, interdistrict, a province, central committee, and Politburo, or even Congress, the highest policy-making body. I don't remember an occasion when we were seized with legal issues, or when we were worried and bothered that what we are doing has legal implications, first and foremost, within the party, and secondly, against the backdrop of the Constitution, the national Constitution. So when you look at the minutes that Musengezi has put or attached to his application of the 19th of November 2017 meeting, what is very striking about that or those minutes is that there is absolutely no concern or even thought that the momentous decisions that are being made have constitutional implications. There's not even an attempt to raise any constitutional question or to say we are taking decision A, B, C, D in terms of this or that section of the constitution of the party. It's like a group, let's get together. Now that we've come together, let's find one of us who is the most senior among us to chair this meeting. Let's make these decisions and so forth. And in a way, for me, that is very consistent with the practice, the political culture of political parties in Zimbabwe. They are political parties. They are not legal entities. They are not constitutional entities. They act with political authority and so forth. So I find this a very interesting case for that reason, that finally this culture that is very deep-seated in Zimbabwean political practice is coming under legal spotlight. And for me, I see the MDC case as having been made in anticipation of this one. And I think the judgment of the Supreme Court is more applicable to this one. These are the facts relevant to that judgment than the MDC facts. There may be some similar facts there, but I find this very interesting because hopefully it will help us deal with a very serious problem in our political culture, especially given that the national constitution makes certain assumptions about the political party that provides the candidate or the person who ends up being the president of the country. So I'm not sure, Brian, what if there are some questions. But since I'm talking, I heard Pilani referring to the Chiweshe ruling and raising questions in response to what you were probing as to its likely implication on this case. As far as I'm aware, there is no Chiweshe ruling, and there will not be a Chiweshe ruling because it was an order by consent. I mean, the whole thing was just a friend. There were no parties that were, having in any dispute. They just made that application in order to say that Mnangagwa expulsion as vice president of the country had been of no legal force or effect. But it was a very clear judgment about his vice presidency of Zimbabwe. It had nothing to do with his vice presidency of the party. And the issue of his vice presidency of the party did not arise. And one does not necessarily have to be a member of a political party to be appointed vice president. The constitution of the country is very clear as to how the president appoints a vice president. So his issue of the vice presidency was not addressed. That's why the minutes which have been attached to the application address that question up front. That meeting of the Central Committee purports, first and foremost, it does two things before they get into the various issues they did. One, they say who should chair the meeting. It's an important question because the constitution of ZANU-PF is very clear about first, who should convene a Central Committee meeting, and second, who should chair a Central Committee meeting. It's not a Bambazonke. So they then address that issue by simply saying, we will appoint Obert Mpofu because he's the most senior among us. And then secondly, they decided to find that the expulsion of Mnangagwa as vice president of ZANU-PF and first secretary of ZANU-PF and a member of ZANU-PF was, well, they don't even say it was illegal. They actually say we are reinstating him. So they reinstated him as a member of ZANU-PF, reinstated him as vice president and second secretary of ZANU-PF. There was no deliberation. They didn't even say he has applied to be reinstated. They just moved to reinstate him. They did that because they were aware that the court case, the Chiweshe case on the 23rd of November, which had not even happened, by the way. When they met to do this, the Chiweshe ruling was not there. The meeting is on the 19th of November, 2017, and the Chiweshe case or the Chiweshe order is on the 23rd of November. So they didn't, I think in their view, they wanted him to be eligible for the presidency as a successor, as a sitting vice president. And they moved on that day to dismiss Mpoko. So they just wanted to leave one person, Mnangagwa, as the one qualifying for the presidency. But there is no ruling. We won't get a ruling on that. There is an order. I think what is significant, I heard you, Brian, raising what I thought was an interesting point as to whether subsequent, if it is found that the meeting was, the Central Committee meeting was convened illegally, it was conducted illegally, and it made illegal resolutions, were there subsequent structures of the party or meetings that could condone or did condone these illegalities? Well, what is interesting, at least in terms of Mnangagwa's leadership of the party, is that there has not been any such meeting since that Central Committee meeting. Even the extraordinary Congress of December that same year, 2017, was not called subsequent to this Central Committee. It had been called already, and it had been called, in terms of the ZANU-PF Constitution, an extraordinary Congress is called for a specific purpose. So that one had already been convened, and it had not been convened to condone a Central Committee appointment. They were even so, I don't know whether one would say audacious or crazy, because they didn't say that the Central Committee elected Mnangagwa, and that election was going to be condoned by a later Congress. They said they were appointing him, and the minutes used the word appointing, that the Central Committee is appointing. Now, the Central Committee can't be in ZANU-PF, in terms of the ZANU-PF constitution, an appointing authority. But it purported to appoint him, and Mnangagwa, when he was addressing the extraordinary Congress that had been called by Mugabe for a different purpose, thanked the Central Committee for appointing him president, and said he was hoping, expecting the extraordinary Congress to ratify, he used the word ratify, that appointment. But what is significant is that the president and first secretary of ZANU-PF can only be elected by a Congress. And it's an election. The process requires nominations from the provinces and an election at the Congress at an appointed time. This didn't happen. There was no province that even purported to nominate him or even to recommend the endorsement or ratification of his appointment by the Central Committee. The reason this goes back to 2014 is because that's when there was the last Congress. And the ZANU-PF, in terms of its 2014 constitution, is a one center of power party. The powers for the vice presidents are no longer elected as they were before 2014. Since 2014, they are appointed by the president and first secretary of the party. The expectation from 2014 was that in terms of the constitution of ZANU-PF, the next Congress was scheduled for 2019. And they have not had a Congress since 2014. Even the 2019 Congress, which in answer to your question, the question whether the illegalities could have been subsequently condoned, I think the 2019 Congress would have done that if it had been properly convened by ZANU-PF, and ZANU-PF being the first respondent in the case. But ZANU-PF didn't convene a Congress in 2019. And what you have since 2017, since the 19th of November 2017, you have a series of continuing illegalities. And to borrow a phrase I learned from you, Brian, you have a festival of illegalities, continuing festivals of illegalities up to now. And I think my last comment would relate.
Yeah, Brian, I just
on irrelevant the sorry.
No, sorry, I thought you were finished, Jonathan. Carry on.
No, I was just making my last point to say that Brian asked a very important question about why now. He was asking the applicant. In fact, I just want to make two quick points. One is on that one, and the last one I want to make, and I'm just thinking about now, is this this tortoise on the lamppost theory, which I had Pilani talking about. But Brian, the question, why now? I think this is someone who found himself part of these issues. And although the application came when I myself was not available, was not active, we had taken time off to remember my daughter. But I since have found myself in conversations with colleagues and so forth. Clearly, quite clearly, it would have been impossible to imagine this application coming at any time before last year's Supreme Court judgment on the Mashavira case. I think it could only have been after that case. But if there is an illegality, there is no time set to remedy illegality. And you can seek to remedy an illegality, because this is, I heard somebody talking about 3 years, and I think it was Pilani. When you look, there's no prescription for a declarator. There's no prescription to correct an illegality. You correct it when you become aware of it. And you should not only be aware of it, but I think you should also have reasonable expectation that if you approach the court, you will be heard. In this case, it will really be, I know that Zimbabweans have become disillusioned and really given up on the judiciary in Zimbabwe. But this case will embarrass any court. I mean, it will be very interesting to see which courageous judge wants to confirm that they are compromised and are happy to make some political decision or to prove that they are indeed compromised. I think this is as good a time as any to correct an illegality. It's a continuing illegality, and a continuing illegality can be stopped at any time in its continuum, along the line. That is my view. Lastly, I think, and I've read this from Magaisa and I heard from Dr. Zamchia, this idea that when a Zimbabwean brings a legal action, they've been sent by someone is unhelpful. We cannot look at each other as citizens and describe ourselves or call other citizens tortoises. I think this is completely unhelpful. But I understand the spirit that when an action that has implications for all of us comes up, and then all of us as citizens, and we express interest, it doesn't mean that there was a big room somewhere where people sat and planned and conspired, and then they sent this one courageous guy. For me, I'm so thankful that this application has someone like Sybeth Musengezi, who speaks for himself, who is more, so far, he has been the most articulate person in explaining the case. I was really, I felt proud as a Zimbabwean listening to him in his interview with Peter Ndoro on SABC. And that interview disproved, or at the very least challenged, this tortoise theory that somebody has just put a tortoise on a lamppost, and then you have to find out who this person is and so forth. You might as well call anyone who brings any litigation in court, you might as well call them a tortoise. So no, Dr. Zamcha, I don't think we are dealing with a tortoise here. I think we are dealing with one out of many members of ZANU-PF, current and former, who've been affected by a major development in the party, and there is a natural meeting of minds or meeting of interest. You didn't bargain for this, Brian, when you asked me to speak, but there you are. You took a risk asking